Well, we are starting to see some breakout when it comes to what's going on just to our north up in Iowa. I know it's super early. I know it's a Tuesday morning. By the way, thanks for joining us on KCMO. But we do find ourselves in a situation where our friends up to our north in Iowa are starting to differentiate between presidential candidates. I know we're like 5 months away from the Iowa caucuses. But whenever you see somebody tell you that a national poll means that, Trump's going to walk in with the nomination, and he might do it. I'm not saying he won't. I'm not suggesting it's not likely or it's not the most likely option right now. It definitely is. But what you have to do, and what I always think is more important, is to look at the early states. Look at the early states and say, what are they actually doing there? What's happening in those polls? I don't really care about national polls because if you're in California, if you're in Texas, if you're in Alabama, if you're even here in Kansas and Missouri, you're not necessarily locked in to what those states are seeing and doing on the ground. They're already, in places like Iowa, they're already getting political advertising, right? They're getting their ads pushed on them. I'm sure it's good for TV and radio stations up there. God bless them for that. They got a lot of political money already coming their way. They've got candidates doing rallies, doing meet and greets on the ground. Doing all those things. It's not happening anywhere else. But it's happening there. So I look at these early state polls, and there was one yesterday that came out, and NBC News wrote about it, and it shows that Donald Trump still has a massive lead in Iowa. He's at 46%. That's a huge number. Now, it's not a majority, it's plurality, but it's a big plurality when you compare to the other folks who are, out there right now. So it's got Trump at 46, 30 points ahead of Ron DeSantis at 16%. But it also shows big movement at the next level. DeSantis is kind of stalled out, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's been very disappointing for a guy who's been by far the best governor in the country, and I thought was going to be able to really straddle the fence of likening himself to Trump voters while also bringing in enough people that might be disenfranchised by Trump under his umbrella and taking the mantle away from a guy like Donald Trump. But he hasn't done it, and he's frankly failed colossally thus far in doing that. So he's just stalled out in the mid-teens. He has not taken advantage. He has not had a good campaign. I know he's firing a bunch of people here over the last week. It's not been pretty for him. But where the movement's been, because Trump's really always sat in that 40 to 45-ish range, like Trump hasn't really moved off of that number. But where the movement's been is with a guy like Tim Scott, of all people. Tim Scott, the South Carolina U.S. Senator, is now in third place. He's in double digits in South Carolina at 11%. And he's not showing up anywhere close to that in national polls. But once again, the national polls don't really matter. What matters are the early states, who's got momentum, and why is a guy like Tim Scott bumping up the double digits? I'm not sitting here trying to convince you that Tim Scott's going to be a guy who's going to, shock the world and be the nominee or anything like that. I'm not going to tell you that because I don't think that's true. But there's something to be said for the kind of campaign Tim Scott is running, which has been pretty lean, by the way. He's doing some media, but I don't see a lot of advertising coming out of that campaign right now. It's not backed by some big PAC like Ron DeSantis. But Tim Scott's kind of running that happy warrior campaign. And while I think that campaign worked better in 1988 or even in 92 than it does today, there's still a want amongst a portion of people who want to hear somebody say, yes, we got a lot of problems in this country, but America's still the greatest place in the history of mankind. It's the greatest country that's ever existed. Like, we still want somebody who's going to say, yes, we have a lot of issues, but. Yeah, there's a lot of things to fix in this country, but. And for a lot of us, we thought a guy like Ron DeSantis might do that. He might be that guy who is, I don't want to say the happy warrior, but he blends the culture wars and the success in Florida with a vision for the country beyond what he's had so much success with in Florida. Going after woke Disney, Making sure that kids aren't being taught sex ed in second grade. Like, yes, those things are great, and he should brag about those successes, but he's also got to have a national vision. And thus far, Ron DeSantis hasn't really done it. All he's done is try to outflank Donald Trump on cultural issues. And one thing you're learning is that you're not moving Trump voters off of Trump. I mean, I don't know how you could do it at this point. So Ron DeSantis, what he did is he thought, geez, I could maybe peel off a quarter of Trump voters, combine that with, other people who want me to be the nominee, and boom, I've got the whole thing wrapped up. Well, that's not happening for him. And he's been a one-trick pony thus far, and he's not Mr. Charisma either. I mean, I'm really surprised at how lackluster he's been. Frankly, his wife's a bigger star than he is. I mean, just from a pure media perspective, his wife is a much bigger star and much better at that part of the game than he is. And I remember when he was out in Olathe, it was last September. He was out for Derek Schmidt when Derek was was running for governor of Kansas, and he was the nominee against Laura Kelly, and DeSantis came out, and he did that event at the Olathe Conference Center, and I remember, I remember hearing stories about how he's not Mr. Personality and how he's still kind of working on that side of his game, so to speak, and he definitely needed it. He got up on stage and he gave his speech, and it was probably 15 minutes too long, but I saw potential there. The problem is, since he announced he's running for president, I haven't seen any growth. In fact, I've seen a guy take a step back, a guy who does not seem comfortable in his skin when he's talking to media and when he's sitting down for these interviews, and that's hurt him. Whereas you look at a guy like Tim Scott, and, Tim Scott, he's going on The View. I mean, think about it. If I'm Ron DeSantis, I would run to The View. I would run to The View because I would go into the conversation knowing that you're 10 times as smart as every one of these dopes combined sitting at that table with you. Why would you avoid that? Like, if you believe and you understand the issues and you know that you walk into the room and you're the smartest guy, which really isn't saying much with the people you're surrounding yourself with on a show like that, why wouldn't you do more of that? Like, Tim Scott's doing some of that. He's always got a smile on his face. And when you look at the polling up in Iowa, it's resonating thus far. The story out of this recent Iowa poll with Trump at 46, DeSantis at 16, Tim Scott at 11, it's not about Trump being immovable. We kind of know that. We know that Trump's got his 40%, and that's not changing. It's not about DeSantis, who's sitting there in the mid-teens. I mean, that hasn't really changed for a while now. It's about why is Tim Scott, who was polling at 2, 3, 4%, how is he doubled, tripled, quadrupled that number in a fairly short period of time? Well, yes, he's an evangelical, and that obviously helps in Iowa, and that's a factor for him. And of those three guys, if you're looking at somebody who resonates the most with the evangelical crowd out of Trump, DeSantis, and Scott, it's going to be Tim Scott. That certainly helps him. But there's something to be said for a guy who, yes, understands the issues that the country's facing right now, and he's not denying them by any stretch, but he's simply reminding people that, hey, we are Americans, and there's incredible value in that. There should be appreciation in that. Somebody who is willing to say that, yes, this is still the greatest country ever, and I'm not going to change my opinion on that because Joe Biden's trying to screw it all up right now. Like, that's worth something. And some of those things that Tim Scott is doing are things that I thought Ron DeSantis would ultimately do. I thought he would weave that message into his record of success in Florida in a more meaningful and positive way. And thus far, he's completely failed to do it. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's him. I don't know if it's the advisors. I don't know. But the takeaway is that there's still something that people want to hear on that front. And frankly, the DeSantis campaign can learn from the success that Tim Scott is seeing. Because it's not over. I mean, it's far from over. I mean, we've got months left of this. But the only polling that I really look at is Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, some of these early states, and see where the trends are and look for a trend. And then you say to yourself, okay, why is that happening? Because those people are the closest to the candidates right now. It's not me. It's not us here in Kansas and Missouri. It's those folks. And then read into those trends and try to figure out why those trends are happening and what it means, by the way, in 5, 6, 7 months down the road. 913-408-7710. That is the studio and the text line as we get it going on a Tuesday morning here on KCMO Talk Radio, 710 AM and 103.7 FM. Also, of course, stream us on the all-new KCMO Talk Radio app. We will get to you as we get it rolling on a Tuesday morning. Plus, we have an update on one of your favorite beers. Now, that's right. I have not seen these numbers. They just came down here in the last few hours. And I think many of you will be happy with these numbers on a Tuesday morning. So we'll get you those coming up next. Pete Mundo on a Tuesday on KCMO. I want to ask you, Mark, are you familiar, have you heard of Armed Forces Brewing Company? Do you know them at all?
I do not off the top of my head.
Okay, I don't either. I never heard of them. I just saw their CEO, Alan Beal, on Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo. And I don't know if the beer is any good. I don't know. All I know is he is seeing record numbers in sales. It is a beer that is created by an award-winning brewmaster and successful veterans of the restaurant and hospitality industry and military veterans as well. It's available in a few states and 36 states by online mail. So I want to get the CEO on the show. I don't know if it's in Kansas or Missouri. I don't know. I mean, if you've seen it, let us know at 913-408-7710. Or if you've even tried it, because I just saw this guy on Fox Business this morning, and I was impressed. And I'm always looking to try a beer that is not run by woke idiots. And that's certainly, of course, what Bud Light has been run by with Anheuser-Busch for far too long. And we've got some new numbers, by the way, on Bud Light I want to share with you. There was a belief that last week was a sign that the tide was starting to turn for Bud Light. Last week, I was out, and the Bud Light sales came in down 23% year over year for the week. And the belief was, all right, the bleeding is starting to stop, because for the last several weeks, they had seen declines of nearly 30%. So when you go from down 30% to down 23%, you start to feel like maybe you're digging out of this thing, right? Maybe you're starting to see things trend in the right direction. Well, nope. Nope. Here we go. We've got the Bud Light sales for the week ending July 15. So that's about 10 days ago now. It is exactly 10 days ago. And the loss was over 26% year over year. And this came 1 week after the drop was only 23%, so people were like, okay, great, this is moving in the right direction. Nope, no, it's not. And Bud Light continues to drop with no end in sight. On top of that, Modelo, which overtook Bud Light as the top-selling beer in May and June. And by the way, I'm not trying to get you thirsty at 6:23 on a Tuesday, but I know some of you already of the belief that it's 5 o'clock somewhere, so why not here in Kansas City? Modelo, which overtook Bud Light as the top-selling beer in May and June, was up over 13% last week. Modelo's market share has grown 8.1% year-to-date. I mean, that is darn impressive. 8.1%. Meantime, Yuengling, Coors Light, and Miller Lite are all surging at an even faster rate. Yuengling up 25%. That's now in Kansas City. And if you haven't had a Yuengling yet, it's a Pennsylvania-based beer. It is so good. As an old Villanova guy, there was plenty of Yuengling back there. I hadn't had one in a long time. And then they brought it out here to Kansas City, and, man, it is doing bonkers numbers. I was actually golfing Father's Day weekend, Friday of Father's Day weekend, and Buddy and I got done, wrapped up the round, went on a cold beer, and they had Yuengling on tap. And I was like, damn, all right, I like where this is going. So they had Yuengling on tap, and they said it was doing well. They said the sales were good. Meantime, they had a tap of Bud Light, and they thought about switching it out. That's how bad things were going for Bud Light. And it's very anecdotal, I understand that. But I was sitting there thinking to myself, geez, even the local golf course is having a rough time with the Bud Light here in Kansas City. So when you see Yuengling up 25%, you see Coors Light up 22%, Miller Lite up 17%. while Bud Light continues to see disastrous numbers. I don't see any end in sight. Like, I don't know about you, but everybody that I've anecdotally talked to who's like, hey, I'm done with Bud Light, not going to drink it anymore, I'm over it, it's not worth it to me. Anybody who's said that to me, like in my own personal life, they have no intention of going back. Like, there's not going to be some day, like, it's not like when the calendar flips to April 1 of 2024, which will be give or take a year from the original boycott-ish. It's not like they're going to be like, all right, we're going to do a year boycott and then be done with it. They're just like, no, I mean, I've kind of moved on. I mean, you've got other beer options now that, let's be honest, are pretty much comparable to Bud Light anyway, where you sit there and you say to yourself, I'm good. I moved on. I got to send a message somehow. And if this is the message that needs to be sent to corporate America, then so be it. Remember, this is not about an anti-trans, anti-Dylan Mulvaney thing. It never was. Despite what you see on social media, it's not about being anti-trans. The Bud Light boycott was always a double middle finger to corporate America at large that had continued and is continuing, albeit at a slower pace, continuing to cram down obsessive, woke social beliefs and policies on their consumers who just want to buy their product. That's it. That's all it ever was. No one cares about Dylan Mulvaney. No one thinks about Dylan Mulvaney. No one gives a you-know-what about Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney was simply caught in the middle of traditional America and corporate America, where corporate America was continuing to push social beliefs on the traditional America who just wanted to buy the products for what they were or buy the services for what they were, but they couldn't help themselves. And there was never really a good chance or a good opportunity to boycott something like this. But then comes along Bud Light, an all-American brand, drank primarily by traditional Americans, and they just put their foot in their mouths and made an all-time great marketing mistake. And traditional America saw an opening to stick it to an all-American brand and say, we're done. We are not doing this anymore. And it was an easy thing. Let's be honest. It was an easy thing to boycott as well. 913-408-7710 as we get it going here on a busy, but also a fun Tuesday morning. Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio. Thanks for joining us here as we get it rolling. Our text line, 913-408-7710. I can't imagine how many of you are going to be going back, but I'd be curious if you would actually ever consider going back to Bud Light. I mean, if there's a drop-dead date or if you're just like, nah, I'm done, I'm good, I'm out, and I'm never going back. I just feel bad for the guys who are going to be carrying around Bud Light all over Arrowhead Stadium this fall. They're going to have the biggest muscles in the stadium this side of Chris Jones. I'll tell you that right now, assuming Chris is there. Jeez. Pete Mundo on a Tuesday. News coming up in 2 minutes. Lowe's doing the right thing. Rehiring an employee. We'll tell you why that's important next. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Thanks for joining us just after 6:30 as you get your morning started here on KCMO Talk Radio. Been a busy morning already. James has been waiting patiently in Olathe, and we started off the show talking about how Tim Scott, the South Carolina senator, is making up some ground and making some headway in the Iowa polling, which is really the only polling that matters. National polling's irrelevant. Tim Scott's at 11% in an Iowa poll that was done in the last couple of days. That's a solid third place behind Ron DeSantis at 16. Trump is obviously in the lead at 46%. But, I posed the question here throughout the morning, why is a guy like Tim Scott quadrupling his numbers from when he announced? And I think it's part because he's done the Happy Warrior routine, which, as much as people know America's in a bad place, they still yearn for. They want some of that Happy Warrior mentality, and Tim Scott's brought that to the table. James and Olathe, what do you got for me? Good morning.
Hey, how you doing, Pete? That beer thing is such poetic justice.
Yep.
I think, I like Tim Scott. I like DeSantis. I like that Ramaswamy, or however you pronounce his name. I like all those guys. But I think the general challenge they've got against Trump, that in spite of all of his bombastic persona, conservative people have seen Trump as not a man who's afraid to act. He's not all talk. He will act. And I think these other competitors have to convince the voters that they actually will act. Because, how many of them ran this last election, including Scott? We're not going to allow these 87,000 extra IRS agents. We're going to put a stop to that. Well, didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So, they've got to convince the voters, whether it's Scott or DeSantis or whoever, that, DeSantis, at least to a certain degree in Florida, has shown he will act. And that's one thing people say about Trump, in spite of his shortcomings, and there's a lot of things I don't like about Trump, but he will act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, James, thank you.
Washington, that's got to be, that it's going to take more than just window dressing to clean that up there.
Absolutely. James, thank you for the call. And everything you said is right. Now, it's easier to act when you've got the bully pulpit of the White House, right? Tim Scott, as a U.S. Senator, can complain about the 87,000 IRS agents, but let's be honest. Chuck Schumer runs the Senate. Chuck Schumer's going to get what he wants. The Democrats are going to get what they want. There's nothing that Tim Scott, as a U.S. Senator, can do. So Trump's had the biggest bully pulpit of anybody in the race, obviously, as a former sitting president, who can say, I've done more than anybody else in this race. That's obvious. The question I would pose, and I'm not telling James or any of you what to do, the question I would pose and ask is there somebody, knowing Trump's negatives in polling, is there somebody who you believe can do just as good a job on the policy side, yet also may have a better chance to beat a Joe Biden, or, by the way, somebody not named Joe Biden? I do believe that as of today, Trump could beat Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden is so wounded, is so pathetic every time he shows up in public, that people will, yes, not like Trump, but there are millions of Americans who will pinch their noses and go vote for Trump because they know Biden is a walking disaster on the policy side and also just, frankly, as a person. The guy can't string together two sentences anymore. It's pathetic. It is pathetic that this is the leader of the free world. Even if you like the policies, it is pathetic. But I'm not convinced that he's going to be the guy. And, I mentioned yesterday that I spent Friday morning with Bill O'Reilly at his home. Not trying to name drop here, Mark. I'm just getting to a story. So I'm not trying to name drop on you or the audience right now. But Bill O'Reilly did mention to me that he also, and he has long believed, that Joe is not going to be the nominee. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, of course, is just what you're seeing physically and mentally. It's not all there anymore, and it's beyond obvious. No one can deny it. But then it's also the Hunter Biden stuff. And a friend of the show, Charlie Gasparino of Fox Business Network, he just put out this tweet. Charlie Gasparino writes here on Twitter in the last 20 minutes. Covering white-collar crime for so long, I can tell sleazy stock pumps, AMC, or irrational exuberance, XRP, from a mile away. But for my money, the sleaze surrounding Hunter Biden is up there with the worst of Wall Street. Of course, referring to Hunter Biden making millions of dollars for himself and his family off of Joe Biden's name. Charlie goes on the right. My bet is that Barack Obama steps in and tells Sleepy Joe that he can't run. That's from Charlie Gasparino in the last 30 minutes. And, Charlie's pretty plugged in with this stuff, and there's more and more people who are suggesting that, not just privately, but publicly. O'Reilly's been on this publicly for a long time. We talked a little bit more about it privately as well in the last few days when we got together. But now you're hearing people like Charlie Gasparino, who's a business reporter really at the core. He doesn't do a lot of politics. But when Charlie Gasparino is willing to put stuff out like this on his social media pages, that tells you that there's at least some rumblings around this being possible. Not likely, but possible. And I think a lot of us understand that Barack Obama and many of his acolytes, Susan Rice, have been running the show for a very long time now. I mean, they're the ones who are, a lot of people believe, in charge behind the scenes. If you think Joe Biden's in charge, you're kidding yourself. The guy doesn't even know which side of the stage to walk off when he's done with a speech. You think he's running anything? You think he's in charge of anything? No, he's not. So if Obama's the guy and his people are the ones who are really in charge, then if Obama tells Joe to take a hike, then guess what? Joe's going to go. Because if he doesn't, Obama can make his life miserable. He can make his life and Jill's life miserable. Barack Obama can get the Democratic Party in this country to do whatever he wants. He is still the face of that party, even though it's been, 7 years now since he's been in the White House. He is still, because they have no bench, he's the face, he's the puppet master. And if he tells Joe to leave, if he tells Joe it's time to step down, as long as Obama knows there's a succession plan in place, whether it's his wife or somebody else, then he's going to tell him to go. And by the way, don't discount the embarrassment Barack Obama might somewhat feel indirectly by this guy being up there, leader of the free world, and also admitting that, yep, that was my VP for 8 years. Now, I know that, Joe used to be somewhat with it a little more than he is today, but still, it's not exactly a good look for Barack when this is the guy that he picked to be his VP. And some of this alleged corruption was happening, by the way, under Barack's nose while the both of them were in the White House. And that kind of embarrassment, that personal embarrassment that could be coming to Barack Obama, should not be overlooked in terms of how he might be thinking right now as well. 913-408-7710. That's also the text line here on KCMO Talk Radio, 710 AM and 103.7 FM. Speaking of Obama, I haven't talked about the guy in a while. Did you see what happened to his chef? I'm not suggesting there's anything more there, but it's really a tragedy. If you haven't seen it, Barack Obama's chef died. We'll tell you how and the details behind that story coming up next. Just a real tragic story here if you missed it. I mean, we just mentioned Barack Obama's name and what he may ultimately have to say about Joe Biden's future in 2024. But this came down late yesterday. A former White House chef who was working for the Obama family was found dead yesterday in a pond on the south shore of Martha's Vineyard, according to Massachusetts police. Tafari Campbell, 45 years old, was employed by former President Obama and was visiting Martha's Vineyard at the time of his passing, according to a Monday news release from the Massachusetts State Police. So Tafari Campbell was reported missing early Sunday evening after going paddleboarding. He went into the water, appeared to briefly struggle to stay on the surface, and then submerged and did not resurface, according to an earlier state police news release. Another paddleboarder on the pond with him at the time witnessed him go under the water. Massachusetts environmental police officers recovered Campbell's body shortly before 10 a.m. yesterday. Police used a side-scan sonar from a boat to locate him, and divers from the department's underwater recovery unit recovered his body, which was about 100 feet from the shore at a depth of about 8 feet. I've seen a lot of things. People have found this guy, Tafari Campbell's social media, and the initial report was that he did not know how to swim. That is not true. Tafari Campbell does know how to swim. He did learn as an adult how to swim, and he bragged about that actually on his Instagram page. So if you hear anything saying this guy didn't know how to swim, why was he paddleboarding? That's not true. He has shown, and he has videos up on his Instagram suggesting that he was very much into swimming. He learned how to swim. And by the way, he was very much into being physically active as well. He was an active dude. So I don't think there's anything nefarious there. I don't right now. But people obviously want to jump to certain conclusions when you see a story like this. because it does make you question, like, so the guy's 45 years old. He's in good health. He knows how to swim. He's in 8 feet of water, by the way, in Martha's Vineyard. He's not out on the ocean. And he somehow is with somebody else. He's not by himself. Another paddleboarder's on the pond with him. And they witness the guy go underwater, and then he never comes back. I'm not saying you got to jump in after the guy, but something's weird. Did he have a heart attack? What happened? I don't know. And I'm not going to sit here and necessarily speculate on that. But right now, I just sit here and say it's a tragedy. But it also is very bizarre. Not going to lie, it's very bizarre. So I saw that, and everyone's kind of putting out their own theories on social media. I'm not going to bother with that right now, but I certainly will tell you that if you see anything that says this guy, Tafari Campbell, could not swim, that is not true. But yes, an Obama family employee did die paddleboarding off of Martha's Vineyard. And that's certainly a tragedy. As we approach 7 o'clock on KCMO Talk Radio, 710 a.m., and 103.7 FM. Happy Tuesday. It's good to be back with you. Wall Street Journal had this headline here that I wanted to share before the top of the hour, because there's a lot of folks who are declaring victory, especially people in the administration, around inflation. Well, the Fed's not doing that. Wall Street Journal had this piece last night, why the Fed is not ready to declare victory on inflation. Officials remain concerned about whether wages and price growth can slow enough without an economic downturn. Well, that's obviously the question. And let's not forget, yes, inflation went to a 21-month low last month at 3%. But 3%, is still 50% higher than what the Fed wants inflation to be year over year. They want it to be 2%. Now we're happy that inflation is 50% higher than the Fed's target and what the Fed's historical target has always been. But I guess it's not 9.5%, so we're supposed to be happy about this. It's still not good news. You still have major economic issues when it comes to pricing and what the next 6 to 12 months are going to look like in this country. So the Wall Street Journal writes here in part, some Fed policymakers and economists are concerned that the easing in inflation will be temporary. They see inflation slowdown as long overdue after the fading pandemic-related shocks that pushed up rents and the prices of transportation and cars. And they worry underlying price pressures could persist, requiring the Fed to lift rates higher and hold them there for longer. I can't tell you what Jerome Powell is going to do. I have no idea. But he's not a guy who signaled that he's done. Now, he was late to the party. Everybody knew it. This guy was trying to keep his job under Biden and talked about inflation being transitory and all that garbage from 2021 that anybody who's taken an Econ 101 class knew was nonsense. But they pushed it anyway. They were wrong. And then they had to chase their own tails by jacking up rates at a rapid pace, probably not as rapid as they should have last year, but that's what they did. So now we just sit here and we wait. And we wait for what they're going to do. I've got to get on, whether it's Steve Moore or Gasparino, I'll try to get one of those guys on tomorrow and analyze this piece, because you see a stock market that is continuing to boom here. This year has been a heck of a year for the markets, and anytime we have on an expert, they're like, yeah, I didn't see this coming. Well, nobody did. No one saw this coming. No one really predicted this kind of a year for the markets, whether it's been AI-driven, big tech kind of bouncing back. That's been a big leader. But you're still sitting there with these really high rates and saying, how's this happening? What's going on here? And that's why I'm just going to step back and say, get me Charlie, get me Steve Moore, get me one of these guys, and we'll try to break it down with them tomorrow, because there's a lot of confusion from a lot of people. And I think if the market believes that Jerome Powell's done, it's wishful thinking. I think he's still going to have to continue to bump these rates up at some point, because I think that those that want to do cartwheels over one good month with an inflation number of 3% are probably celebrating just a little too early. Just a little too early. So we'll see how it plays out here on KCMO, and we'll look forward to getting one of those guys on tomorrow. Look at these numbers for Jason Aldean. My goodness. Have you seen these? I could not believe it. It's been less than a week since Jason Aldean's song, which you just heard there coming back from the break, Try That in a Small Town, was called pro-lynching and racist. I mean, it is. I get surprised, and I probably shouldn't, by some of these controversies, but this is the dumbest one yet. Based with no rhyme or reason. Oh, he's singing in front of a courthouse where a black guy was lynched almost 100 years ago in the music video. As if Jason Aldean knows that. The guy goes to a small town in Tennessee to record a music video. Like, no offense to Jason Aldean, but do you really think he's doing research on which small town Tennessee courthouse he's going to record a music video? And what might have happened there 95 years ago at this point? I mean, that is, gosh, it's beyond a reach. It's beyond a stretch. It's just literally trying to cancel somebody for the sake of canceling them. It's one of the dumbest controversies I've ever seen. But it continues to take on a life of its own. All right, so here are the numbers. This was written yesterday afternoon by The Hollywood Reporter. I didn't think we'd see these numbers. All right, so music sales and streams say the song's on-demand audio and video streams have increased 999%. Where's Ric Flair when I need him? Holy cow, that's a monster number. Yeah. Cashing that check big time. This song, before the controversy, had 987,000 downloads. It now has received 11.7 million downloads, Mark. That's a pretty damn good number if you're an artist.
That's crazy.
Guy went from 1 million to 12 million in a week on a song that was released like 2 months ago, by the way. So it was unlikely to take off. And I say this, by the way, as someone who's not really a big Jason Aldean fan. I've been listening, and hearing his music on radio. My first job was at a country music and news talk radio station in Woodward, Oklahoma. And we were playing a lot of Jason Aldean 11, 12, 13 years ago now. And I've really kind of just been like, I don't think he's a great singer. I mean, maybe he's a good performer live. I've just really never cared for his music. But I'm incredibly sympathetic for the insanity that he's dealing with here. And this song, it's not his worst. It's okay. It's fine. But look at this. Sales for the song are up as well. For the week before the controversy, the track only sold 1,000 units. Last week, it sold 228,000 units. That's people buying the individual songs on their iPhones and smartphones and things like that.
And people don't buy songs like that much anymore.
No, yeah, I was going to say, Mark, no one's, because, either listening on the radio, hopefully, support radio, hashtag. You've got Spotify, you're listening to your favorite streaming app, whatever it might be. But you're right, Mark, no one's really buying the song anymore. He sold 1,000 units of the song 2 weeks ago. Last week, he sold 228,000 units of the song. Now, we know CMT, Country Music Television, pulled the song's music video from its rotation last Tuesday, and they're getting crushed for that move. The clip only had, the song only had about 350,000 views on YouTube. I mean, it's like, don't get me wrong, that's a good number, but when you're Jason Aldean and you're a top 3, let's say, country music star today, top 5, whatever, 350,000 is okay. It's certainly not a hit by any stretch. Right, Mark? You would say 350,000 is not a hit when it comes to, YouTube views in a song.
No, yeah. It would take a little bit longer to build up, I think.
You got to be in the millions for a song to be in a hit.
Oh, yeah.
Well, now, in a week, it's been viewed 16.6 million times.
Wow.
From 350,000. The success has helped the song debut at number 2 on the all-genre Billboard Hot 100 chart, number 1 on the Hot Country chart, and this marks Aldean's highest-charting single on the Hot 100 and beats out Morgan Wallen's Last Night and Luke Combs' cover of Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, which has also been an enormous hit. And by the way, just last week we were talking about how the Washington Post was trying to cancel Luke Combs for claiming that, it's racist that he made the hit number one, despite the fact that Tracy Chapman won Grammys off of that song 35 years ago.
Oh, it's so funny. So funny how this works.
You can't make it up. You can't make it up, Mark. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is completely insane, but it's the times that we live in right now. So we're living through these times, and Jason Aldean is now having incredible success off of this song that was kind of like, I don't even know if, I'm not a Jason Aldean fan, as I noted. He had his first concert this past Friday since the controversy in Cincinnati. And he obviously played the song and talked about it, which we played for you yesterday. But what I don't know, and I can probably find this, was this song even worthy of him playing in concerts before last week? Or was it kind of one of these songs that he made, it was on the recent album, but wasn't really getting any traction, so he wasn't playing it? I don't know. If you do know, let us know at 913-408-7710 on the text line. But now, all of a sudden, this song has taken on a life of its own. It's become this cult-like song, and that's not fair. I'm not suggesting it's cultish if you like the song, but it's taken on a life of its own because of what the song represents. Liking the song and being a fan of the song is a great way to stick two middle fingers in the air towards cancel culture, big media, big tech, big corporations in this country. That's what it is. That's what it's become. And that's how it's become cult-like in how it's been portrayed over the last week. And that's what makes this unlike anything that's happened. And here's what I've got to believe around the Aldean song. I've got to believe that people that tried to cancel Aldean knew that this was possible, that this song could potentially take on a life of its own and become a smash hit and get millions of downloads that it would not have otherwise gotten, right? I mean, that's just common sense, that the people that were going after Aldean knew this was possible. But to me, what they're also doing and what they're also attempting to achieve here is scaring other artists. Jason Aldean's going to be fine. No matter what, Jason Aldean's going to be fine. But they're trying to, I believe in part, scare other artists, smaller artists, and future artists from singing and representing traditional, small-town American values that they don't agree with. That's what this is about as much as anything else. Aldean's going to be fine. He's a superstar. But it's about scaring the crap out of the potential next superstar into saying, just watch out. I mean, we'll cancel you before you become big time. We'll cancel you before you get to Aldean's level. You want to be singing about those small-town, traditional American values, think twice. They are trying to wokeify country music as best they can. You guys are in a funny mood on the text line this morning. One of our tirades was about Sound of Freedom. Pete, surprised you didn't watch the movie with Bill O'Reilly last Friday. You could have got him popcorn and then told us all about it. I wouldn't be bragging about such a thing. By the way, I think Sound of Freedom, Bill is great. We've gotten together now the last 4 summers. We got together on Friday morning at his beautiful home right on the Atlantic Ocean. He's got about 75 feet-ish of private beachfront property on one of the most beautiful beaches in the world along the Atlantic Ocean. We hung out on the back porch, but Bill usually gives me about 45 minutes to an hour of his time. Sound of Freedom, I see, is 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that's double the amount of time I usually get with Bill. So I've probably got to do better than just popcorn to get him to sit down for a movie with me. Plus, that I want to get the insights from Bill O'Reilly. I mean, part of enjoying time with Bill, exactly right. Part about enjoying time with Bill is getting to hear the stories, Mark. It's not about sitting there next to him and watching a movie. I mean, I could do that by myself or with anybody else. Why do I need to do that with Bill?
Yeah, we need story time with Bill.
Exactly. Now, a story I did not share, by the way, and I can't tell you every story from my hangout with O'Reilly, but what I can tell you is that Bill has spoken with Tucker Carlson. And I can't share everything, but what I will say is they've spoken to each other. It has been cordial. They're not best friends by any stretch of the imagination, but they have spoken. There's nothing happening between the two of them. They're not like going into business together or anything like that, but they have had conversations. They have talked to each other. Bill has given Tucker some advice. But I think the general perception from people that know Tucker Carlson is that he's not one of these guys. I mean, he's a content guy. From the people I know, not just O'Reilly, but others who know Tucker Carlson, like Tucker's the kind of guy who is a great writer, brilliant communicator, outstanding broadcaster. Whether you like what he says or not, you should be able to admit he's a great communicator and a very good broadcaster and a very good writer. He writes all his monologues. But he's not like a business guy. He's not a guy who could go out on his own and start his own operation. Now, he could be in business with other people who run the business side, like Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's outlet. From what I understand on how that place works and how it began, Ben was the content guy. He would be the guy that would do the shows, the writing, things like that. And then you had a business guy who was really the business side of the operation and would go out there and, get the ads and build the business and things of that nature, do what needed to be done to build the brand. Tucker is not a guy who can do both. Bill has his own operation, obviously, at BillO'Reilly.com. I would not foresee Tucker going down that road unless it was in conjunction with somebody else who's the business person and Tucker's like the face and the content guy. That's what would make more sense based on the people I know who are close to them. So I will watch Sound of Freedom. I have to get it on my to-do list. And one of these next couple of weekends, certainly before football starts, because as Mark knows, once football season starts, the weekends get even crazier. Because then I got no time to watch anything because I'm glued to the TV watching football. College on Saturdays, NFL on Sundays. But before football season starts, I will watch Sound of Freedom. I promise you that.
Good call.
Now,
I
won't – thank you very much there, Mark. What I won't be watching anytime soon is the new Snow White movie, and neither will my kids. Not going to watch it. Snow White, if you haven't seen, they got the new movie coming out, the remake coming out, and it has gone completely woke since it came out in 1937. Now, I understand that times are different. I get it. But the notion that you should change the premise of the movie where, a woman is looking for her knight in shining armor, is looking for her prince, because the times have changed, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If you're going to remake Snow White, then remake Snow White. If you don't like what Snow White portrays, that's your prerogative, but then just make a new movie. Don't wokeify Snow White. So here's some commentary. If you haven't seen this, this is commentary from a couple of the stars who are in the new Snow White movie, and here's what they had to say about the remake.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Snow White is running for president.
I'm launching my campaign.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. Oh, it's so painful. That is Rachel Ziegler, the actress playing Snow White in the live-action remake of the film. Now, I'm not against the notion of, female empowerment, do what you want to do, be what you want to be. But the notion that, you can't just be looking for true love. Life's not about true love, is it? No, it's about being a fearless leader that you know you can be. Gosh. Because, obviously if people fall in love and settle down and have families and, live that kind of lifestyle, they might not be sufficiently woke. Oh, my goodness. Could you imagine a world where men and women want to get together and find true love and have stable families and stable marriages and stable partnerships, and they grow old together and they love each other and they have monogamous relationships, and they aren't obsessed with the latest cultural trends of the moment? They aren't obsessed with finding and craving their latest dopamine rush from their phone, from their boss, from pornography, from alcohol, from drugs. I mean, what kind of world would that be? Hollywood tells you. So now we must sufficiently wokeify Snow White. Just make a new movie, but don't ruin a Disney classic to create a world that you want to see. Because in the end, they all end up completely miserable anyway. Not nearly as happy as Snow White. Hey, Ron DeSantis in a car crash traveling to Tennessee campaign event. That's come down here in the last hour. He and his team are uninjured, according to his press secretary, Brian Griffin, who adds, "We appreciate the prayers and well wishes of the nation for his continued protection while on the campaign trail." Thankfully, obviously, nobody's hurt, but gosh, it's kind of a microcosm of what his campaign has been thus far, sad to say. I had very high hopes. I thought he was a guy who could straddle the line of appealing to the diehard Trump base while also bringing in a broader tent to the Republican Party, just like he did in Florida, where he won by, 15, 20 points in his reelection last year. It hasn't happened. He has completely fallen flat. Now, there's a lot of time. It's very early. But it has not been a good rollout for the Ron DeSantis campaign. And the car accident this morning is kind of in many ways encapsulates what has been a rough campaign thus far for Ron DeSantis. But thankfully, everybody's going to be okay. Now, the Jason Aldean saga and drama that has continued to unfold here, I think there's something bigger that needs to be addressed with Jason Aldean. And that is the fact that Jason Aldean is going to be fine. We told you earlier in the show that Jason Aldean's song, Try That in a Small Town, had 1,000 purchases the week before last. Last week, after the controversy, it got 228,000 purchases. And people don't really buy music anymore. So 228 times the amount of downloads last week versus the week prior. It's completely crazy. Completely crazy. But the broader point around Jason Aldean, and the broader point to me, and the message that's being sent to not country music stars today, but aspiring country music stars, is to stop singing about your small town values. Stop singing about God and traditional America and how you grew up and how much you miss it and how much you miss America represented or resembled what you grew up with in small town America. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it because we don't want people to be enticed by it. And that's the message that's being sent from mainstream America, from corporate America, to cancel culture America, to rising country stars. Because you got to remember, a lot of these stars today, they don't write their own stuff. Now, some of them do. They contribute. They're listed as a author of the song, writer of the song. But many times what you have happen is guys who are trying, or gals, who are trying to make their way through Nashville will help write songs to get their name out there for some of the big stars. The Jason Aldeans of the world. The Blake Sheltons of the world. And that's how they get their in. They write a hit, and then they start playing their own stuff, and then they become stars themselves. Not stars, but they might become just, guys who can make a living or gals who can make a living singing their own music. That's how they often start. They'll write music for some of the bigger acts. Well, they're sending a signal to those folks, hey, stop writing about what you care about. Stop writing about how you grew up. Stop writing about the small town things you perceive to be important in this country. We don't want to hear it. And if you can take this Jason Aldean song and turn it into a song about lynching, for crying out loud, then they can take just about any song and interpret it however the heck they want. When you look at the lyrics of Aldean, sucker punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjack an old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool? Well, act a fool if you like. Cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag, light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough? Well, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. The song is very simply about the differences between small-town America, where that stuff would not fly, and major American cities where we saw for the last 3 years people loot, steal, rob, spit on cops, and suffer zero consequences. In fact, we got this latest story, if you haven't seen it, Lowe's. Yesterday, I put it in my good, bad, and ugly. But Lowe's fired a lady who had been there 13 years because she tried to stop people from stealing from that Lowe's. Well, Lowe's decided to rehire her a day after she was fired for attempting to stop a group of shoplifters. This ties back to Jason Aldean's song. Corporate America is okay. I'm trying to think of the big women's clothing store that we told you about in, I think it was California a few weeks ago. Was it Lululemon? It was one of those overpriced women's clothing stores that, unfortunately, when I go into my own walk-in closet and my wife's side, I see too much of. It was one of those. I think it was Lululemon. But anyway, so many of these major companies are just accepting crime. They're telling their employees, hey, don't get in the way, don't do anything, just let people walk in, take what they want, and leave. That does not resonate. Now, I get why they're doing it to some extent from a legal perspective. But either way, those kinds of decisions do not resonate with small-town American values. Where if you tried that in your mom-and-pop store, I used to live in Woodward, Oklahoma, 10,000 people, northwest Oklahoma, largest town for an hour in any direction. All the surrounding towns were 500, 2,000, 1,000. You had to go to Enid, Oklahoma to the east, and you probably had to go to Amarillo, Texas to the west, which was 3 hours away, to find a town bigger than Woodward, Oklahoma, where I lived for 2 years. If you tried any of that crap, you tried to walk out of there with somebody else's stuff in a mom-and-pop store on Main Street in Woodward, Oklahoma, you probably wouldn't make it out alive. It's a different mindset and a different set of values compared to a Nike store on the plaza, compared to a Lululemon store, at City Place in Leawood. It's just a different mindset. And if corporate America wants to accept people in major cities walking into their stores and stealing and doing nothing about it because guess what? They can afford to do that as a major corporation, fine. That's their prerogative. And also because they have a soft spot for the, no crime, no jail nonsense that we're living through. But that's not going to fly in small-town America. And that's what Jason Aldean is singing about at the very core. So, by the way, Lowe's did rehire this employee. Lowe's put out a statement on Donna Hansborough, who was fired after she tried to stop a robbery at a Rincon, Georgia store last week. Suspects punched this 68-year-old woman in the face once she intervened, and then Lowe's fired her to boot. Well, they brought her back. They put out a statement saying, after senior management became aware of the incident and spoke to Donna Hansborough today, we are reinstating her job, and we are pleased that she has accepted the offer to return to Lowe's. First and foremost, there's nothing more important than the safety of our customers and associates. Products can be replaced. People cannot. See, that's the classic Fortune 500 mentality. Whereas in small-town America, which is what Jason Aldean's singing about, product is your bottom line. Product is food on the table for your family. So it's a different way you perceive the product. Anyway, Lowe's goes on to say, we continue to work closely with law enforcement to investigate and prosecute those who are responsible for this theft and violent attack. Well, goodbye, Lowe's, but if I was Donna Hansborough, I'd be like, go pound sand, I'm going to Home Depot. I'm just saying, if I was her, that's what I'd be doing. See if Home Depot will take you in. Just a thought.